Welcome to Day Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We have the session here every Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time, to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about data vault, data mining, data-driven applications, cloud computing, MVP stuff. I didn't bring my cluster here to the office, so it's still in our home basement. But yeah, so if there would be no questions at all, I would essentially talk about the cluster or some other stuff. But we have a good number of questions at the moment. So, but if you have questions, just shoot them, right? So it's always good to have a good backlog, so I can pick interesting ones and so on. Doesn't mean the other ones which I didn't pick yet are interesting. I didn't have no we have some questions where I don't have a good answer within 10 minutes or something, essentially. Yeah, if you have a question, you can raise them here in the chat if you want. You can raise them in the Q&A functionality of the client. You can just raise your hand if you want, and I would give you a voice. We can make this live. It's not a problem at all. I'm used to that from consulting experience or from conducting engagements, workshops, and from trainings. So it's all good. We have a question though. So let me just show it to you. I can find it quickly. There you go. Okay, so this question is essentially about a mixed model where the user here has both raw data vault entities and some other entities. So let me just read this. We have most of the data in our raw data vault designed in hubs linked satellites, but some data exists outside of this in the same database, but not using data vault entities. I modified the question a little bit. And we want to integrate the raw data vault data with this data in the business vault. Is this an allowed approach in data vault pattern? So first of all, so I assume you're talking about let's say a different schema, but same database where there's some other tables essentially, and you have this schema for the raw data vault. From a data vault expert standpoint, it shouldn't be allowed, right? But that's what it is. I mean, I'm also very pragmatic, to be honest. So let me tell you where we do something similar, and then you might make your own decision. In managed services BI, we essentially have a raw data vault, we have a business vault, we have information marts, but we also have the user space. And the user space for power users where they can build their own solutions. And yes, the hope is always that they use data vault patterns, hubs and satellites. But in reality, I mean, look at my user space at Scalefree. You would find some reference tables. We have to talk about those as well. But you wouldn't find that much data vault entities there. On the other hand, Mark, he's the other trainer at Scalefree. When you look at his user space, it's always empty. Why? Because he used data vault models, and the internal team had a much easier process of getting his solution industrialized into the raw data, into this managed raw data vault, business vault, information mart, than with my stuff. And well, why didn't I spend so much time? Because my stuff was temporarily. So I don't want to industrialize this anyway. So in the user space, the hope is always that they use data vault entities, but in many cases, clients, they don't. They use all kinds of models. And then the idea is to come up with a user mart where you essentially join the entities in the user space with the entities from the raw data vault, from the business vault, from the information mart. You join it all together into a user-based or user-driven, user-generated, user-produced information mart. We call it the user mart. And that's then be used for reporting, for example, or other use cases. Now, this user mart we would never use, or just like the user mart is part of the user space, and we would not use the user space with anything as part of our loading process for the business vault or for the information mart. But the reason for that is it's unmanaged. So that's just one example, okay? And the idea is then that we industrialize the user spaces once in a while and to turn this into real data vault solutions. Because here comes the data vault expert again. You should not do this, right? Now, I mean the non-data vault solutions. Then we have reference tables. Just another example. Reference tables are used in data vault to simplify the model. We do this for, I don't want to say the unimportant data, but for the data about your business objects is the most important one, let's say that. And there's some data like reference data, country names, zip codes, and so on, where you don't want to spend so much time modeling this data. And you realize that the business keys are relatively short, fixed lengths often, ISO codes, and so on. And for this data, we typically use either a reference table, black and white table, code is the primary key, and then some descriptors. Or nowadays, we often use a reference hub and a reference satellite to keep track of changes. So closer to the data model, but without hash keys, without much overhead. So there's some, we do relax this to some extent. but that's part of the model as well. Now, let's say you have some entities sitting next to your raw data vault, and you want to build a business vault. The thing is, it depends on the answer. The question is, or the question of what I would ask is essentially this: do you need lineage, for example? Do you need to prove what kind of auditability? Sorry. So do you need auditability? Do you need to prove what data has been absorbed by your data warehouse, and how did you process it? And are you able to reproduce every delivery? Are you able to reproduce every report? In that case, if you have auditing requirements, and I don't know your context actually, if you have auditing requirements, that seems to be a no-go, because I just assume, without knowing, that these site tables are not loaded in a fully auditable fashion, like with history tracking and so on. I don't know, right? So depends on the tables now. But are you meeting the auditing requirements with those tables essentially? Or are you updating them and so on? That's one thing. And then the automation capabilities. If you follow this design, it leads to the fact that you complicate your query patterns in the business vault. And there are some ideas out there, floating out there, how you could automate parts of the business vault as well. Like at the moment, we are automating everything using metadata-driven automation tools like Warescape, DBT, Data Vault Builder, Vault Suite, and so on. And there's other capabilities of generating metadata as well. There's lots of AI these days available, or some AI, not lots, but some AI available as well to generate the metadata for the raw data vault. But then when you get bored because everything is generated on raw data vault, people start automating the business vault. And those patterns you complicate. That's what I would say. Plus, it starts turning into a mess, to be honest. That's what it is. Now, what about this? So you have some side tables, and we have a migration strategy where you have a existing data warehouse, and you want to replace it by a data vault essentially. But you want to go sprint by sprint. So let's assume you want to get rid of these side tables. You want to make it a pure data vault solution in the long run. Let's be positive. And in this case, what about virtually deriving the data vault entities from these side tables? That's what we're doing in the migration projects. Because I always say in the training, all your data, all your enterprise data, but also your personal data, has three fundamental components: business keys, relationships, and descriptive data, including your analytical enterprise data, your dimensional models, for example, star schemas, and so on. A dimension has business key somewhere, has descriptive data, maybe a relationship to another dimension in a Snowflake design, and so on. So what about if you would create a virtual hub link satellite on top of these external tables and add them to your raw data vault virtually? And then you could even attach physical tables to it, to this virtual hub. There's a physical satellite that you load from the source system even, or link it to the existing data, for example, or unionize it in a business hub, for example, that kind of stuff. So you don't need to materialize your raw data vault. It makes sense in many cases for performance reasons and other reasons. But what about this, right? So just virtualize it. Could be an option. And then because what I want to achieve here is to get you back into the patterns of data vault again. So as quick as possible, for two reasons. You can stick to the data vault query patterns in the business vault. You don't have to reinvent something or have different patterns now depending on what you query. And you can replace later, when you're ready to replace those side tables with data vault, you can replace them and you have the model done and so on, right? So that's what I would recommend. Virtualize it and to add it essentially. With some drawbacks, because that still, if they update these tables, that doesn't give you full auditability, right? So that's still a problem because you just virtualize the data and that's it. You have other problems. Where do you get the hash key from, for example, and so on, right? So you might want to think about a materialized hub, for example, materialized links and so on, because they will create you the hash keys, and with those you could produce virtualized satellites. So that would be let's say the pragmatic option, or let's say the good pragmatic option. Now, yeah. So if that's not an option, can you integrate this data with the business vault? Technically, yes, but it will become a mess. So if I do it, I would only do it for the quick solution. but then I would refactor if I have some more time. And that's what I would really plan for. So I would add this to the technical debt and change this pattern again. So but here's the promise, the data vault expert here, right? So when I look into the reasons why we use data vault in the first place at clients, they have requirements, right? For auditability, lineage, they want to be able to capture changes over time on the structure of the source data set, but also the business logic and so on. So they have reasons why they use data vault. And those reasons you're jeopardizing with this approach. If that's okay, because it's really a requirement question now, right? Do you need a data vault? And if not, you could essentially jeopardize the data vault design in this regard to some extent. I'm not a big fan of it. So I would, but yeah, I'm the data vault. I like data vault, so that's the other thing. But I see the values, right? The values bigger than the requirements. That's why I like data vault, not because it's why I wrote a book or something. No, I see the values. So yeah, that's would be my take on it. You can be aware it becomes a mess over time because you will not do this for the last time, right? Most probably, and then it becomes a bigger mess in your business vault over time. You lose the capability of automating it, the business vault. Yeah, but I gave you the virtualized raw data vault option maybe, and then replacing these side tables with a quote unquote correct data vault approach with staging and so on. That might be the interesting option. We did something similar in the book for the reference data, dealing with master data. I'm not sure what the chapter was, master data management, I believe. In the book, we essentially import the tables from MDS, from Microsoft Data Services, where we store the master data. We import as virtualized reference tables. Follows a similar approach, right? Reference tables is super simple. That's back then we didn't use even history, no change checking or nothing, but no versioning. So we just captured a type 1 reference, flat and white reference table essentially. A practice which most people don't do anymore these days. Typically they use a reference hub and a reference satellite so they can keep track of history. And that's also a question: is the site containing history or not? So how do you limit yourself, right? So those are the questions I have. I would go for it temporarily, but then I would try to refactor it as soon as possible and really add it to the technical depth. So you're doing it and not just talking about it, right? All right. So yeah, you can, but be aware. Okay. So if you have a question like this, good question. Yeah, use this form behind this URL, sfr.ee/dvfriday. That's where you can submit your question. You can also submit multiple questions at, well, it doesn't matter. So just type them in. And we have additional webinars at scalefree.to/webinars, where you can also watch the webinars on DBT and Westgate. And I'm just reading on the chat, could you publish the missing Data Vault Fridays? But first of all, I was stumbling over DVFs. Well, what is that? I was like, oh yeah, Data Vault Fridays. That's a good abbreviation. They should be on YouTube already. And there's a process at Scalefree where we publish them. So once they are processed, they will end up on YouTube and end up in the knowledge base. But check out where they end up on YouTube on the Scalefree.com user. And that's where you find them, even if they're not yet on our website. But I wonder why they're not there. But yeah, they will be there. And we publish most of the Data Vault Fridays. There are some which I don't like, but most of them end up on YouTube essentially. All right. Then also, if you can't wait for the next Data Vault Friday, next Friday apparently, I'll be there. So there's no reason against it. Yeah, check out the Data Vault Innovators community. Data Innovators community. That's a forum-style community where you can also ask questions, where the consultants or experts from Scalefree, but also from Ignition Data in Australia, they jump on your questions and answer them. They have a little competition running. Who answers the fastest, I believe. Yeah, so this is a long story. Yeah, so it's also interesting. It's free community. Just sign up, right? So it's so cool. And if you have some time this month on the 23rd and 24th, we have the data agreement coming up on September 23, 24. That's in Hanover. It's a real conference with shaking hands and yeah, going out for dinner and so on. Not virtual. We don't produce this. Well, we don't have a live channel at least. So it's on site. It's in Hanover, Germany. If you have any chance, I'll be there. A lot of people from Scalefree will be there. A lot of people from our customers will be there and present what they're doing. And I will share some of my work that I'm doing lately, the last years what I was working on essentially. Some interesting stuff. So all about data vault and data mining, AI, raw data vault, that kind of stuff. Okay, cool. So it's really cool stuff. So if you can make it, come over. It will be fun. And yeah, we have a lot of topics to be presented essentially. Cool. Thanks for joining today from the Scalefree office. Next time, most probably from my basement again with my cluster. If it helps, if it's helpful to like get you attracted again. But yeah, it was fun. See you next time. See you next time. Have a nice weekend, guys. Thank you.